When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
Talk about the early life of the man who has been accused of and
Acquitted,
of these 3 murders.
Yeah, we're going to cover the early life of the main suspect, Gene Leroy Hart. Known to friends and family as Sonny, Hart was born in 1949 and grew up in Locust Grove, Oklahoma. He was a member of the Cherokee Nation and a star high school football player raised by a single mother.
He was voted the best athlete in his graduating class and had offers for scholarships to college, but he decided not to go to college. He stayed in Locust Grove to work, and he married and had a young son. But his wife left him in 1966 after a series of arrests.
That year, Hart pled guilty to charges of kidnapping and raping 2 pregnant women. The women had been kidnapped at gunpoint outside of a Tulsa nightclub, driven out to the middle of nowhere in Mays County, tied up and raped repeatedly.
Duct tape and rope were used in the crimes. The women's hands had been tied behind their backs, and they had been duct taped to trees. They were left for dead after being covered in brush. Miraculously, one of the women was able to break free and get help.
And I'm not sure how they were duct taped to trees. I don't know if, he turned the duct tape kind of into rope, and I don't know. I tried to figure it out, but I couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
But anyway, that's interesting part of the story.
I agree.
Hart confessed to the charges, but his family members and community supporters believed that it was a false confession. Hart thought that he would be given a suspended sentence since he claimed that the 2 women had gone with him willingly and hid in his trunk from their husbands.
He was given a 30-year sentence, but only served 2 years and 4 months before being released on parole. Soon after, he was caught burglarizing some apartments. Because he was on parole for the rape and kidnapping charges, he was convicted on 4 counts of burglary. He was given consecutive sentences totaling over 300 years.
In 1973, after being returned to the Mays County Jail for a hearing at the Mays County Court, Hart escaped, but was quickly caught by police. Authorities returned him to the Mays County Jail, where he escaped again.
Wow.
But this time, he remained on the run for years.
Yeah, I think I saw in the documentary that his mom helped him with the tools to escape from the jail.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
She brought him a book or maybe even a Bible into
she baked
jail.
him a cake with a file in it?
No, well, it was a Bible with a file in it. Yeah, like Shawshank Redemption style. And he would empty out the shavings in his jeans in the yard. No, I'm just kidding. But he used that to
escape,
break down the bars. Yeah, and escape,
Wow.
which is wild and also very embarrassing for the Department of Corrections.
Yes, it was.
So legend developed around him, the man who could not be caught. He remained in the Locust Grove area and was seen around town, but would disappear when authorities came looking for him. And as you might imagine, this was an embarrassment to the authorities. They were embarrassed.
Yes, they were.
So let's get into the timeline. What do you got for us, Beth?
So on June 12th, 1977, around 140 Girl Scouts left Tulsa, Oklahoma on buses, headed to Camp Scott, which was about 50 miles east in Locust Grove, Oklahoma. They were going for 2 weeks of camping and fun. Among them was 8-year-old Lori Farmer, a bright little girl who was said to be mature beyond her years.
She was the youngest Girl Scout at camp that week, a gymnast, an avid reader, and a doting big sister for her 4 younger siblings. She grew up in a close-knit family with her mom, Sherry, a homemaker, and Bo, an emergency room physician.
Camp Scott was split into 10 different units. Each one was named after Native American tribes. Within each unit were 7 tents for campers and a counselor's tent. Girls were assigned to units depending on their age.
Lori was assigned to a tent in Kiowa unit. The tents were placed on wooden platforms and contained 4 cots. They had no lights, and a large flap served as the door. Some sources say that Lori was assigned to tent number 7. Other sources say tent number 8. And my son has been to a camp like this for Boy Scouts. And the tents are like way more substantial than I ever thought. Like it's not just, it is a tent in that there's like a wood floor and a tarp, but the tarp is like super heavy duty. Rain doesn't get in, but it's like, I was blown away by like, this is not the kind of tent you get at Walmart.
No, definitely not.
These are serious tents.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they have like cots in them and stuff like that, just like we described. So
yeah,
I was just surprised and I wanted to share. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Okay.
So this tent, regardless of whether it was tent 7 or tent 8, it was the 7th camper's tent. And it was located the furthest away from the counselor's tent. So there were 8 tents total. 7 campers' tents and 1 counselor's tent. Okay. And the counselor's tent was over 80 yards away from Lori's tent. And Lori's tent was the only tent whose view was obstructed by the showers in the middle of the unit.
Okay. Kiowa unit was also the most secluded of the tents, tucked into the furthest left part of Camp Scott. A trail that passed by the Kiowa unit led to the back gate of the camp. Oh, I didn't realize that that's where the tent was situated.
Yeah,
that's really not good planning, in my opinion.
Well, I guess there had to be a tent, somewhere on the edge of the camp,
Right. But you would think that like maybe the older kids would be put. I mean, a lot of thought gets put into like who goes in what tent.
Right.
And just seems like
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So while all of the other tents in the camp had 4 girls in them, Lori's only had 3 girls. And this was due to a scheduling error. I'm guessing that the child who was supposed to be there, their parents didn't realize they were supposed to be there that day. Yeah. So that child was supposed to arrive the next day. And Lori instantly became friends with the 2 girls sharing her tent, 10-year-old Michelle Gousset and 9-year-old Denise Milner, who was one of the only black girls at camp that summer.
And she did not want to go.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. That evening, heavy rain began falling. After dinner, instead of their previously planned activities, all of the girls were sent back to their tents to write letters home. Lori and Michelle wrote upbeat, excited letters about friends that they had made.
So good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses.
I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Have you ever wondered about things that go bump in the night, or objects in the sky, or other things you just couldn't explain? Then join me, Jim Mallard, on my podcast, The Mallard Report. Each week, you'll find engaging conversations with guests who are authors, historians, and scholars who lend their expertise as we discuss current events and venture into the fringe and paranormal. The Mallard Report hits controversies head-on, yet remains conversational, and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other major podcast platform.
Michelle Gousset was not a stranger to camp. She had gone to Camp Scott the year prior. She was a shy, athletic girl with an interest in horticulture. African violets were one of her favorite plants, and before leaving her home in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Michelle insisted that her mother take care of her violets and other plants while she was away at camp.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Although Lori and Michelle's letters home reflected excitement, Denise's letter home reflected homesickness. Denise was a straight-A student who had been admitted into a Tulsa school for exceptionally bright students. She had initially been excited about going to camp with her friends and sold Girl Scout cookies to earn enough money to be able to go.
However, at the last minute, her friends backed out, and Denise had reluctantly gone alone to camp. She was not keen on the idea of leaving her mom, Betty, and her 5-year-old sister to go to camp by herself. And on the bus to camp, Denise cried about having to leave.
After the trio finished writing their letters, all of the girls gathered for story time before heading to bed. During story time, Denise was again upset and asked to call her mom. One of the Kiowa counselors comforted Denise. After some convincing, Denise agreed she would wait and call her mom the next day.
The first nights at camp are always loud. The girls are excited to be with their friends away from their parents. As the girls were winding down, a counselor in the Comanche unit saw a dim light moving through the woods toward the Kiowa unit. She assumed it was another counselor.
Around midnight, Counselor Carla Wilhite heard some campers giggling outside near the latrine. She got up, got the girls, and escorted them back into their beds. Around 1:30 a.m., Carla was awakened by girls giggling in Tent 6.
From the door of her tent, Carla shone a flashlight towards their tent and hollered for them to go to sleep. I remember those days.
Yeah, lights out.
Then Carla and fellow counselor Dee Elder walked over to Tent 6 to get the girls to quiet down.
From the darkness behind Tents 1 and 2, Carla heard a low, guttural sound, or a moaning coming from the woods. Though they assumed it was an animal, when Carla went to investigate and shone her flashlight in the direction of the noise, the sound stopped.
She turned around and started going back to her tent, but as soon as she did, the sound started back up. So she turned around again, and for a second time started walking back that direction. As she shined the flashlight towards the sound, it stopped once again.
Carla would say later that when she was back in her tent trying to fall asleep, she could still hear the sound. One camper said they heard a scream in the night, and another camper said they heard someone crying for their mother.
Sometime in the night, a camper in Tent 6 saw a light approaching. Suddenly, the light flooded the tent, and a figure stood in the entryway. Just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared into the darkness, the flap closing behind them.
The next morning, Carla Wilhite woke early around 6 a.m. to get a shower before the other campers got up. She was headed out of her tent, and she spotted what appeared to be a pile of sleeping bags a little way away from her tent.
When she approached, she realized that it was 3 sleeping bags sprawled across the ground. 2 of the sleeping bags were zipped closed. One was open. The body of Doris Milner, partly nude, badly beaten and clearly deceased, was lying outside of her sleeping bag. Doris had been duct-taped to a tree, her hands tied behind her.
County sheriffs would later discover the bodies of Lori and Michelle inside the other 2 sleeping bags. The girls had been assaulted and then murdered sometime between 2 and 4 a.m. Lori and Michelle had been bludgeoned to death and Doris strangled.
Investigators determined that Lori had likely been killed first with a single blow to the head as she was sleeping, then Michelle with multiple blows to her head. Doris was murdered last.
The rest of the Girl Scouts were not told that 3 of their campmates were dead. They were taken to participate in activities away from the campsite until arrangements could be made to take them back to Tulsa.
Around 10 that morning, and without any explanation to the other campers, the camp was evacuated and the girls were bused back to Tulsa. How weird that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Parents were told that there had been an accident, and they only found out about the murders when they heard it on the news.
Camp Scott never reopened. So now let's get into the investigation and the arrest. Hit it, Beth.
Investigators combed through the area looking for evidence. Blood was found on the floor of the tent, indicating that the girls had initially been attacked inside and then carried outside. Also found were a single bloody boot print and a long black hair.
Near where the bodies were found, investigators discovered a number of items: rope, a pair of women's eyeglasses, and a glasses case, a red plastic flashlight, a crowbar, and a roll of black duct tape. Hairs were stuck to the duct tape.
The flashlight had a piece of garbage bag taped over the lens to dull the light. A newspaper was stuffed inside of it to keep the batteries from rattling. There was a fingerprint on the flashlight, but it was smudged and could not be identified.
Wow, I didn't realize there was all that effort taken into minimize the impact of the flashlight, including newspaper around the batteries. Never heard of that.
Yeah.
So some of the camp counselors reported things missing from their tents. A pair of sunglasses, a guitar capo, a handheld mirror, other little things. It's believed that the perpetrator had been hanging around, stealing things, and watching the campsite and the girls.
Weird. That's super creepy.
Yeah, super creepy.
Yeah. According to a later sheriff, OSBI, that's Oklahoma Sheriff, what is it? OSBI.
It's the FBI in Oklahoma, isn't it? That's what I assumed.
OSBI. Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. So yes, the FBI of Oklahoma.
Okay.
So they looked at and interviewed 139 people in the case. But Mays County Sheriff Pete Weaver, his first name is actually Glenn, middle initial H, but they called him Pete. Don't know why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
He already had a suspect in mind for the crime, Gene Leroy Hart, who had escaped from his jail and had been on the run for 4 years. Hart's mother lived 2 miles from Camp Scott.
Several days after the murders, some hunters discovered a cave, also described as an abandoned cellar, which appeared inhabited. There were groceries in the cave, along with a number of other items, including a roll of masking tape, women's sunglasses, and newspapers. A note was written on a cave wall, quote, "The killer was here. Bye-bye, fools." What?
Yeah.
Record scratch.
Yeah, that's weird, and I don't know. I mean, that could have been planted, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about planting evidence, but...
Yeah, I thought the conspiracy theories were pretty interesting about this case. So, more on that later.
Something else, I don't remember if we get into this in the script, but I just wanted to mention that one of Hart's friends said that he liked to steal glasses because he needed glasses and he couldn't afford them. So he would steal glasses and see if they would fit. And there was a lot of glasses stealing involved in this case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. This is the investigation part. All right.
So the newspapers found in the cave were a match to the crumpled newspaper found inside of the flashlight discovered at the crime scene.
Okay.
The sunglasses were identified as a pair stolen from the camp. And the masking tape was a match to the tape found on the red flashlight.
4 small fires had been burned at the mouth of the cave. One of the officers was Native American and recognized that these could be ritual fires. In Cherokee culture, ritual fires can be symbolic of the 4 sacred fires, representing the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west.
Also found in the cave were 2 photographs of 3 women at a wedding. The photographs were publicized, and people were asked if they recognized the women in the photos. The photographer who took the photos recognized them. He had worked at the Oklahoma State Reformatory, where Gene Hart had worked as a photography assistant in the prison photo lab there. And Hart had actually developed these photos.
Oh, those particular photos.
Those particular photos.
Oh, okay. Because I interpreted it as a loose connection. Like, weren't there other people in this photography program too? But it was these particular photos that he identified.
Yeah, these particular photos, the photographer said that he was working there when he took the photos and they were developed. But again, there were accusations of planting of evidence.
Mm-hmm. Which is not out of the realm of possibilities when we're talking about American law enforcement.
Yes.
And just over a week after the girls' murders on June 23rd, 1977, authorities named Hart as a suspect in the case. But Hart could not be found. Hart's legendary status grew as people told stories of his ability to live off of the land.
The search for Hart went on for 10 months at a total estimated cost of $2 million, with progress reported daily on television and in newspapers. Some people claimed that Hart was using, quote, Native American magic, unquote.
Oh.
And that he had the ability to shapeshift. And he became almost a mythical figure for being able to hide and
evade capture.
Yeah, evade capture.
Yeah, well, I mean, 4 years is pretty impressive. Escaping from prison 2 times?
Yeah.
Couldn't be me.
Yeah.
So, however, it's believed that what was actually going on was that people in the Native American community were helping him hide. And his community believed that he was innocent and he was being made a scapegoat because, well, racism, and also because they felt that Sheriff Weaver had a vendetta against Hart. Ever since Hart had escaped from his prison twice and remained on the run, making Weaver look foolish.
Yeah, so all of that does sound possible.
Yeah.
And this was also on the heels of the Red Power movement, Native American civil rights movement. Over the years, there had been very little recognition by the U.S. government or mainstream American society of the history of broken treaties. Attempts at forced assimilation had led to the loss of indigenous languages and the suppression of many Native religious and cultural practices.
Yeah, and families were ripped apart.
Yeah.
You know, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But I did want to just say that the Red Power movement, there's different iterations of indigenous fights for liberation since colonization started. So this was just a newer, fresher version of it with younger people involved. And they, participated in demonstrations and protests. And, depending on who is telling the news story, the descriptions about people engaged in the movement are, they refer to them as, they're so militant. But really, they're just brown people who want liberation. So that's what it looks like.
Yeah, protesting.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But in response, a growing movement of young Native Americans sought to reclaim their sovereignty through what they called this Red Power movement. Galvanized by the protest movements of the 1960s, they staged high-profile protests to raise awareness of Native issues. This was not a time of great trust in American institutions.
Yeah.
No shit.
To put it lightly, yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
In any case, on April 6, 1978, Hart was located in Cookson Hills, 50 miles from Camp Scott, hiding out in a remote cabin. It was the home of a Cherokee medicine man. And Hart was arrested on 3 counts of first-degree murder.
So now let's get into the trial. So Hart's trial began the following year on March 19th, 1979. So all this time goes by and these parents are like just waiting for justice, right, in their eyes.
Right.
So the trial took place in Mays County. Jury selection took 3 days. Many people in Locust Grove could simply not believe that he did it, and they did not believe that he would get a fair trial.
The trial became about race and the treatment of Native Americans. They also made accusations of racial profiling and argued the evidence against Hart was circumstantial and alleged that he had been framed.
I'm sorry, I just got to cut in here again. I am so sorry. But, the trial became about race, and people often are like, why does it have to be about race? Why are you bringing about race? Everything in America is about race, period. And the people of color aren't making it about race. It's America and its institutions and white supremacy.
And it's really understandable why the trial became about race because of the way that the Native Americans were treated, So, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. But again, everything in America is about race. So there's that. But they argued that the hair sample found at the crime scene did not belong to Hart. They also claimed that the bloody footprint in the tent was too small to be Hart's.
Hart's defense team also alleged that the wedding photos found in the cave, which were tied to Hart, had been planted. They also claimed that the fingerprint found on the flashlight was not Hart's, when in fact it could not be identified because it was a smudge. So they didn't know, but they couldn't identify it as Hart's.
Yeah. And, in 2025 eyes, like, why didn't they just test the things? Why didn't they just, DNA wasn't a thing then.
In the 70s, they could barely do anything.
Yeah. It's amazing they solved any crimes. But there had been bodily fluids found at the scene. But in the 1970s, forensic analysis of bodily fluids was limited, as we said, and there was only so much that could be done. The semen found contained sperm that was decomposed or disintegrated, something that happens after a vasectomy. Oh, Hart had a vasectomy, but so have many other men. And so this biological evidence could not be conclusively tied to Hart.
His defense team also presented another suspect, and a woman testified that the flashlight found belonged to this suspect. It was later discovered that the woman had lied under oath, but that never made it in front of the jury. Hey, Fruities, if you're into the kind of stories we tell here on Fruitloops Serial Killers of Color, then you'll love the podcast Ice Cold Case.
For some people, true crime stories are fascinating, gut-wrenching, and heartbreaking. But this investigation into the murder of John Cornelius McGee is as personal as it gets.
Ice Cold Case is a unique true crime podcast where the host and the daughter of the victim, Madison McGee, brings a powerful, personal, and deeply unique perspective to the true crime genre.
Yes, agree with all those things. Now, Madison fearlessly tackles the unknown and will stop at nothing to find out what happened to her dad on July 11th in 2002.
Each episode takes you on the journey of her independent investigation in real time.
Yeah, one of the many things I love about Cold Case is how Madison is able to balance the emotional side of this story while also focusing on fact-finding and truth-telling, from speaking to county officials to family members to even interviewing the police's main suspect in the case. That was wild.
Yeah.
Madison remains steadfast in her mission to solve her father's murder. And while the twists and turns may turn away even a seasoned journalist from moving forward, she just doesn't give up.
And you know what? This is the perfect podcast if you love a deep dive into a specific case and want to put on your own detective hat and explore this riveting mystery.
Yes, told from the perspective of a daughter fighting for justice, for answers, and for closure. Ice Cold Case is the most personal true crime podcast and will make you feel like you're on this journey alongside Madison.
Part 3 starts in April. Find Ice Cold Case wherever you listen to podcasts.
The trial lasted 11 days, and the jury deliberated for 5 hours before finding Hart not guilty. A cheer broke out from the relatives and supporters of Hart as the verdicts were read. Hart wept as his attorneys hugged him and wept. Several feet away, though, the parents and grandparents of the girls who were killed also wept, which is, I saw footage outside the courtroom, and it was kind of the juxtaposition of the two sides and their grief over the position they found themselves after that jury rendered its verdict was stark.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah, super tragic.
Immediately afterwards, Hart was returned to prison in McAllister to continue serving his sentence in connection to the previous unrelated rape, kidnapping, and burglary convictions. Because if you recall, he was sentenced to something like 300 years.
So now let's get into where are they now? Well, I'll tell you, less than 3 months after his trial on June 4th, 1979, after about an hour of lifting weights and jogging in the prison exercise yard, Hart died of a heart attack at the age of 35.
Holy crap.
At the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister, where he'd been serving his time for the unrelated charges.
35.
Yeah, but it's,
so young.
I mean, for people of color, given the history of Indigenous people and access to healthcare and things like that.
Not shocking.
And the effects that white supremacist systems, including him being, incarcerated for a minute, affects your health.
Yeah. No other suspects have ever been charged. In 2013, when Lori's parents, Sherry and Bo Farmer, learned that the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation planned to re-examine some cold cases, they urged Mays County Sheriff Mike Reed to reinvestigate the case.
After a year, Reed started looking over the case. He and the OSBI agents brought it before the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia. There, a cold case board made up of 23 homicide investigators, FBI behavioral analysts, and FBI profilers re-examined the case.
Independently, they each combed through every document and every piece of evidence. After a month, each and every one of them had come to the same conclusion. The murderer was likely Jean Leroy Hart.
It was suggested to Reed and the OSBI to have some of the evidence retested for DNA. The testing would cost $30,000, money the sheriff's office did not have, but citizens in the Mays County stepped up and raised the money, and the evidence was tested in 2019.
Over 300 items were tested. A usable profile was only created from 2 of the items: root material from the hair found on the floor of the tent and a semen stain. While officially inconclusive, the testing yielded partial DNA profiles that matched Hart while eliminating all other potential suspects. But the case remains open.
Lori Farmer's parents, Sherry and Bo Farmer, became crime victims advocates and founded the Oklahoma chapter of Parents of Murdered Children. Per Sherry, quote, "In 1977, there were no victims' rights. Victims are the person who died. You are not the victim. Now we know that when something happens, victims' families are victimized also. We work to get that recognized, that we are those people. We do need help," unquote.
Sherry Farmer also successfully campaigned for the passage of Marsy's Law in Oklahoma, which increased protections for victims and their families in the criminal legal system.
Michelle's father, Richie Gousset, worked with authorities to create the Oklahoma Victims Compensation Board. The goal of the program is to assist with the financial burden of violent crime victims. He also helped pass the Oklahoma Victims Bill of Rights to protect the rights of victims. So, now let's get into our thoughts and our takes. What do you think of this case, Beth?
Well, I remember when I first read about this story, I thought for sure that Hart had been railroaded.
Okay.
But now I'm not so sure. With the DNA evidence and some of the other evidence, it sounds like he might be guilty. But there's nothing in his early life that indicates, to me anyway, that he would commit a crime like this. He was a beloved member of the community.
Yeah.
Had a normal, as far as we know, sounds like he had a normal life.
Yeah.
But obviously up until, he started getting arrested. But there were also allegations that he was railroaded in those cases too.
Right.
But, obviously we don't know everything that happened to him as a child.
Right.
So hard to say. And I wanted to mention that one of the weirder things that's been reported that we didn't get into is that some of the campers or counselors, I think counselors.
The letter, yeah.
Yeah, claimed that someone left a note a few weeks before the murder saying that 3 girls would die. And I don't know if this actually happened or if it was a rumor. The note was never produced and it was allegedly thrown away.
Okay.
So it could just be, something that they said afterwards.
Could be.
But it's also been reported that it was a prank perpetrated by some of the other counselors. But, that whole thing is pretty weird.
Super, super weird. Yeah, I was pretty drawn to that little tidbit part of the story.
I bet you were.
Yeah.
I know you.
Yes, I was. And yeah, the conspiracy theories that came about after the murder, during the trial and after Hart died were wild.
Yeah.
I think you're right. We don't know everything that happened behind closed doors in his childhood. But in the past, I'd thought of what we've talked about in the past about the harm that we covered in this episode done to Indigenous communities over time.
Yeah, and that generational trauma.
Exactly. And that trauma doesn't go away. The pain is like passed down literally in your DNA. And so for Indigenous folks who are not a monolith, but I think any person or population who's suffered harm, I believe there has to be work to heal. And in the absence of healing, harm remains and hurt people hurt other people. So all that to say, like, even if he did have the worst childhood, there are many people who have terrible childhoods who don't go on to commit horrible crimes.
Yeah, like this. This was horrific.
Is a horrific crime. And me personally, I am not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Hart is guilty. I think there's a lot of links.
There's a reason why he was acquitted. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. And I was thinking about everybody's pain. Like, this is just a painful, tragic, sad case. The pain the girls suffered, how scared they must have been that night.
Yeah.
The pain of the parents.
Yeah.
Their classmates, other scouts. Like, and then once the investigation started to hunt for Hart, it felt like his loved ones also might have been experiencing a sense of pain, especially because of what happened to him before and because they believed that he was not guilty. It's just, there's never any winners in this case, but this was a particularly tragic one. And the law really seemed to have it out for Hart to me.
Yeah.
And he made them look like dumb fucks and escaping twice. And they were just so laser focused on him that I think that they lost opportunities to consider other possibilities.
Yeah.
I know they interviewed a lot of people, but, you know, I just feel like because of what Hart did, escaping prison, like they weren't going to let him go anyway, ever.
Yeah.
And one comment that bugged the shit out of me when I was watching the documentary that covered this case, which we'll get into in the shout outs, is this white cop. And he was like, oh, hey, when he was investigating the case, hey, there are a lot of Indians over there. I bet they all know each other. And I thought to myself, Mr. White Cop, there are a lot of white people in all of America. Do you know all of them?
Do you know all of them? Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? A stupid thing to say.
Yeah, dumb.
Yeah, so I don't know if I believe he murdered those girls.
Yeah, I don't know.
There was evidence, and we talked about the note and the letter and the writing in the cave. But rest in power, ultimately. We just want to say rest in power to Michelle, Denise, and Lori.
Yeah.
So now let's move on to our How Not to Get Murdered section.
All right.
All right. If you love true crime and you don't want to die, here's a tip for you.
This segment is not intended to be victim blaming. We thought of this segment because I read somewhere that a lot of people listen to true crime because they want to know what they can do to be safer. This is not meant to blame the victims. It's just learning from other people's experiences.
Yes.
And this tip is not actually, I don't know what this tip is.
well, I like what you've done here, and I've done this from time to time in the How Not to Get Murdered, is sometimes it's not all about not getting murdered. Like, sometimes it's about just being okay.
Yeah.
It's not just... Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you isn't always murder or death. There's a lot of other things in life and part of this suffering. And so any tips to help with suffering, I think are good.
Yeah. Keep you safe or to help you. Yeah. So this, I just wanted to shout out this website. It's aidaccess.org. And Aid Access works with a team of U.S. registered abortion providers who will provide abortion pills to people in all 50 states.
Whoa.
You can even get pills before you are pregnant, just in case you need them in the future.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let me make sure it's still there, because I put this in before, the inauguration.
Oh,
so
shit.
Let me make sure it's still there.
I hope it's still there, not with the Gulf of Mexico, wherever that went.
Yeah, the Gulf of America. Yeah. Yep, it's still there.
Oh, thank God. Okay.
Yeah, so there you go.
Great resource, Beth. Thank you. And as always, y'all out there listening, if you know any ways how not to get murdered or quell any suffering and the world we find ourselves in today, get at us.
In these mean streets.
Yes. Oh my God. Okay, now we're going to get into the shout out portion of our show, where we shout out any content by or about people of color or any marginalized folks or any true crime goodies. So you've got some wonderful things lined up. Beth, can't wait.
I do. So the first one is Keeper of the Ashes, which is a 4-part docuseries with Kristen Chenoweth regarding this case that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up in Broken Arrow and was apparently supposed to be at the camp that summer, but got sick and couldn't go. And anyway, it goes pretty deep into the story and covers a lot of the stuff we didn't have time for in our episode. So give that a watch. And then I also wanted to shout out a show on Hulu called 1,000 Blows.
Oh.
And it's based on the true story of an all-female London crime gang called the 40 Elephants.
What?
But what it's really about is marginalized people in 1880s London. and the cast is diverse, and the story is great. So far, I've only watched 3 episodes so far, but I really like it.
I've been looking for something to fill my Peaky Blinders hole.
And it's by the same people that did Peaky Blinders.
Diggity dog.
Yeah, there you go.
Love it. So the Keeper of the Ashes was going to be my shout out, LOLOL. But
sorry, I stole your shout out.
No, it's such a good documentary.
It is.
Very well done. But Bitch I Can't podcast.
Oh.
And it's wherever you get your podcasts. And I came across it when we covered the Marvin Gaye episode.
Oh, right.
And it's hosted by Anthony. And let me just read you the description of the podcast on the podcast platforms.
Okay.
True crime stories told by a vulgar gay black man. And that's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. It's a great podcast. He's entertaining, dazzling, and tells great stories. The other thing I wanted to shout out is I cannot believe you have not heard this song. It goes, we're in the middle of a hostile government takeover. I want to talk about it, but I'll be late for work. And if you say, wait a minute, who we have to stop this? We had her, but you didn't want the lady in office.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah. And then the rest goes, now that we're a part of a Nigerian prince scam, surprise, surprise, it ended up being a white man. Oh, I just want to know what the hell do I do? And he goes, probably drink. And the beat is it's the song of the summer.
Oh my gosh.
I believe
check that
strongly.
out.
You got to listen to it. It's called Hostile Government Takeover.
Hostile Government Takeover.
Yes, it's on YouTube. It's on the TikToks. It's just a fun little bop.
Cool. Thank you.
So the shout outs again are Keeper of the Ashes, a 4-part docuseries on Hulu.
On Hulu, yeah.
Okay, Keeper of the Ashes on Hulu. 1,000 Blows, also on Hulu. And a podcast called Bitch I Can't, wherever you get your podcasts, and a song wherever you find songs and listen to music called Hostile Government Takeover. And that's all, folks.
Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Listen to Mr. Bunker's Conspiracy Time podcast.
It's a fun show about weird stuff.
New episodes every Wednesday, eggheads. I'm Art.
And I'm Andy.
And Mr. Bunker's Conspiracy Time is a podcast about conspiracies, the paranormal, UFOs, unsolved mysteries. We're going to be discussing the Kennedy assassinations.
Oh, yeah, that's his nickname, Finger Banging Bob Lazar.
Give me some aliens with some good frickin' spacecraft.
The whole enchilada.
The only thing bigger than Bigfoot's feet are our egos.
If you like simulation theory, ancient history, egghead science, and Mandela effect, that kind of stuff.
So check it out. New episodes every Wednesday. All the links you need on MrBunkersConspiracyTime.com.
And we'll see you in the bunker.
Do you enjoy science, spooky stories, and all things paranormal? We do too.
While we would love for most paranormal stories to be true, we are here to tell you that they probably aren't. But that doesn't make them any less fun to speculate about.
We are the Spooky Science Sisters podcast. In this podcast, we bring you bi-weekly discussions on possible scientific explanations behind the supernatural. Backed up by research articles and other credible sources, we do deep dives into things like archaeology and physics and share in-depth discussions with topic experts.
Visit us at SpookyScienceSisters.com to listen to a couple of skeptics debunk some of your favorite alien encounters, cryptid sightings, and ghost stories with science, sass, and a significant amount of laughter.
Thank you, and stay spooky.